In this clip, I want to talk to you about a little topic of market failure. We've said so far, we've extolled the virtues of a purely competitive market as a market structure that yields both productive and allocative efficiency. Well, we now need to acknowledge the fact that sometimes our market model doesn't always capture all of the benefits or all of the costs that are involved in the production of a good or service. So let me start with what we call a cost externality. I'm going to quote a little example here. Let's say this is the market for an agricultural product. This is the market for cotton. Now, this is an agricultural product that requires a fair bit of water. We grow this in Australia, up in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. And of course we need to use a lot of water. So what we're saying here, let's be clear, our demand curve, remember, reflects the willingness of buyers to buy. So attached to that notion is the notion that at each and every price there's a level of consumer utility attached to the consumption of the product. And of course you know that the market supply curve is the summation of the individual firms involved. That's their marginal cost curve above minimum AVC, remember? So what we're suggesting here is that P equals MC, therefore this is an allocatively efficient level of resources being allocated. This is what we want to happen, and that our supply and demand curves are truly representative of the costs and benefits accruing to society. What I'm suggesting here is this. The production of this particular commodity requires a lot of water. So much water is taken out of the upper reaches of the Murray-Darling system. By the time the river reaches its conclusion down at the Murray mouth south of Adelaide near Goolwa, and it's disgorging into Lake Alexandrina, it's lost a lot of its velocity, and of course the phosphates and fertilisers that have been used here to grow this product are dumped into the lake, and that creates massive algal blooms which actually clog up the river system and clog up the lake and kill the fish and create what you'd call a massive cost externality. So here's the key thing. People who are third party here, namely the people at the bottom end of the river, several thousand kilometres away, are being impacted upon in a negative sense. Now, they've got nothing to do with the production up here. The people who are producing this item have externalised their own costs and are not being forced to actually bear any of these costs. So what I'm suggesting is that if this supply curve was more truly reflective of all of the costs, then it would actually be higher up, or to the left if you like, to reflect the fact that costs are higher. It's now embodying all of the costs. So we might have generated a more optimal, if you like, a more optimal outcome would be if we were charging a price of P1 and we were actually producing a quantity of output QO, a more optimal quantity of output, which actually reflects all of the costs involved. But in actual fact, we are producing this level of output, but if this is the more optimal level, then you can see that we're actually over allocating resources to this particular negative externality. Now, where have we seen a model like this before? Well, we'd actually create a model like this if we were to say, okay, what's the impact on a market of the government imposing a tax? Good thinking. And that's exactly what can happen here. To correct for this externality, governments can impose levies or taxes to ensure that the companies involved actually internalise the cost. So next time you see a factory belching smoke into the atmosphere, think to yourself, well, that can't be good. There's probably a negative externality happening there. Why don't we impose a pollution levy? Or we enforce, say, the need for these firms to put in the proper mechanisation to absorb the smoke and to treat it in a more socially or environmentally friendly manner. Now, it's possible that the market actually fails to capture, in some cases, what we call positive externalities or benefit externalities. Let me show you. So let's consider the reverse, if you like, what we call a positive or benefit externality, where there are actually more benefits spilling over to our third parties than the demand curve is actually capturing. So remember what I said before, we need to attach the notion of consumer satisfaction and benefit, if you like, from various levels of consumption at various prices. So let's say, for example, this is the market for immunisation, a fairly crucial thing that you would do, for example, for youngsters in particular, to ensure that societies are healthy, a healthier, productive workforce, etc., etc. So if this is the market for immunisations, though, what we're saying is that our market price and quantity have been determined. We're allocating a level of resources to produce this level of output. But in actual fact, what I'm suggesting to you is that possibly this demand curve doesn't capture all of the benefits that spill over to society at large. So if it were to capture all of those benefits, then in actual fact we need to position it further out to the right. So I'm suggesting that the more optimal outcome, and don't forget that's our key word when we talk about allocative efficiency, that we're allocating a level of resources that optimises society's desires. If that were the case, then this becomes a more desirable outcome, so that's the optimal, but don't forget this is the actual level. So interestingly enough, we're actually under allocating resources to an activity which is actually generating a benefit externality. So I look at that and I think, well, okay, how could I get that demand curve out? Again, a role for government here to subsidise the consumer, so that, for example, you go along and get your immunisation shot and it costs you, say, $40, the government, so that's our new market price, and of course that enables that shift in demand because more people can afford it. But of course the government says no problem, I'll give you some back. So in actual fact we can provide a subsidy, if you like, to an activity to ensure that we get a more optimal outcome. Okay, so we've had a look at the market failures in terms of cost and benefit externalities. There's another market failure I need to discuss with you, and that of course is the fact that markets fail to also produce an adequate level of what we call public goods. I'll catch you next time.